Every single morning, millions of us wake up and, well, we just repeat yesterday. We don't really do it on purpose, right? It's not like you sit on the edge of your bed and carefully map out every move you're about to make. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to explore the quiet, invisible architecture steering human life, our habits. We love to think of ourselves as these perfectly rational creatures of conscious choice, making deliberate decisions as we navigate the crowds in our modern lives. But beneath the surface, in the quiet shadows of our psychology, there is a totally different force at the wheel. Think about this incredibly unsettling reality for a second. Your brain has basically already decided your morning routine long before you even fully wake up. The alarm rings, and without thinking, your hand reaches out in the dark for that glowing screen. You check the exact same apps. You take the exact same route to work. Even your emotional reactions just play out like a pre-recorded tape. And the wild part? Most of us never even notice we're running on a script. Which brings us to a really profound idea. Much of what people call personality is actually repetition. Let that sink in. We usually think of our identities as these deep, permanent, philosophical things. But a lot of the time, identity is simply a behavior you've performed so many times that it just feels permanent. Your fate is really just the accumulated result of thousands of tiny, invisible habits. So the question isn't really if these unseen habits control your life. The question is how much.
Okay, let's look at part one, the illusion of choice and the brain's complete obsession with efficiency. To really understand why we get trapped in these loops, we have to look under the hood at our own minds. If you had to use your full conscious attention for every single action, like imagine having to deliberately think through every individual muscle twitch just to brush your teeth or walk down the street, you'd be completely exhausted by 9 a.m. So your brain came up with a brilliant but kind of dangerous survival hack: automation. It constantly shifts control from deliberate thinking over to automatic execution just to save energy. It's building these invisible mental shortcuts. That's exactly why you can drive your normal route home from work, get totally lost in thought, and pull into your driveway without actually remembering to drive. Your brain literally handed the wheel over to the autopilot. Underneath all that automation is a hidden, rigid architecture, a three-step loop that nobody really sees. 1, a trigger kicks things off. 2, the behavior happens. And 3, a reward tells your brain, hey, that felt good, let's do that again. And then the cycle just gets stronger and stronger. The thing is, we usually only notice step 2, the behavior. But the behavior, that's really just the middleman. Let's look at a modern trap that catches us like a million times a day. Say you're standing in line at a coffee shop. Boom, you feel a brief spike of boredom. That's your trigger. Before you even consciously decide to do it, your hand is already unlocking your phone. That's the behavior. Instantly, you're hit with a flood of new content, a little burst of relief. That's the reward. Do this enough times, and eventually the trigger just picks the behavior for you. You completely bypass conscious choice. You aren't checking your phone anymore, the boredom is checking it for you. Which leads us to part 2, environment and the trap. What happens when your surroundings start dictating your destiny? As a culture, we put this massive premium on self-discipline, right? And we totally beat ourselves up when our willpower fails. But what if we're fighting a losing battle because we're focused on the wrong enemy? Willpower is what we think controls us, but environment is what actually controls us. If you walk into a kitchen packed with junk food, your cravings are absolutely going to spike. If you leave your smartphone sitting right next to your keyboard, your distractions will multiply. We love to imagine we're these fiercely independent decision makers, but honestly, our behavior is constantly unconsciously reacting to the spaces we're in. And trust me, the modern world understands this psychological vulnerability perfectly. Just look at these engineered environments. Social media platforms are explicitly built from the ground up to maximize your engagement. Streaming platforms literally autoplay the next episode so you'll binge watch. Retail stores physically and digitally design their aisles to make you buy more stuff. We're talking about entire billion-dollar industries quietly competing for your attention. They're designing spaces meant to generate the exact behaviors you're desperately trying to resist. Now, to really get why these environments are so powerful, we need to clear up a massive misunderstanding about dopamine. Pop culture loves to call it the pleasure chemical, but that's not really it. Its true psychological role is all about anticipation, expectation, and the pursuit of a reward. Your brain doesn't actually get hooked on the reward itself. It gets hooked on the intoxicating possibility that an unpredictable reward might be coming. It is the exact same psychological wiring that makes slot machines so addictive. That uncertainty, that's the exact reason you just keep relentlessly scrolling and refreshing your feed. Let's dive into part 3, when actions become identity. the emotional roots of repetition.
So what actually happens when we stay stuck in these loops for years? The whole narrative of our lives starts to shift. There's this terrifying threshold we eventually cross, where our habits stop feeling like just things we do, and they start feeling like the very core of who we are. Habits shape identity. But it goes both ways, because identity also strengthens habits. It becomes this perfectly self-reinforcing cycle. If you chronically procrastinate, eventually you just adopt the identity, I'm a lazy person. And here's the crazy part. Once you believe that story about yourself, you'll unconsciously protect those destructive behaviors just to prove your personal narrative right. We get so incredibly attached to our own stories, even when they're the exact things destroying us.
And hiding underneath those stories are the emotional performers keeping the whole show running. You see, unhealthy habits are rarely just bad decisions. They're highly effective coping mechanisms. They give us psychological certainty and a temporary escape from deeper, really uncomfortable emotional states. Stuff like stress, loneliness, fear, boredom, anxiety. That late-night doom-scrolling habit you have, it might actually just be a shield protecting you from the quiet, heavy anxiety of being totally alone with your own thoughts.
This right here is exactly why breaking a habit feels so agonizing. If you try to just crush a bad habit using sheer willpower, you're essentially ripping away your emotional coping mechanism without fixing the actual underlying need. Sure, the behavior disappears for a minute, but that heavy, suffocating discomfort, it's still there. And because your brain is desperately wired to seek relief, it virtually guarantees that your old patterns are going to come rushing back. Now for part 4, the modern attention crisis. The battle across ecosystems. Take all of that psychological vulnerability, all of our deep emotional wiring, and just drop it straight into the 21st century. Our human psychology evolved for an environment that changed at a glacial pace, right? But today, we're living through an attention crisis that's moving way, way faster than our hardware can adapt to. We are absolutely bombarded by constant stimuli. The average person is trying to navigate this chaotic maze of digital temptations, ads, and content streams that our grandparents couldn't have even hallucinated. It's just a relentless, exhausting wave of information crashing over our conscious minds every single minute. And right in the middle of that storm are the infinite notifications. Every single platform, every app on your phone is actively, aggressively fighting for just a tiny fraction of your fragmented attention. They are tapping directly into your dopamine loops. They are weaponizing unpredictability to drag your focus away from your actual physical life and trap it inside their engineered ecosystems. And what's powering all of this? Relentless algorithms. Now, these aren't just lines of random code. They are highly sophisticated mechanisms designed by literally some of the smartest people on the planet. And their one goal is to create repeated, automated human behavior. They are actively studying your personal triggers, predicting what you'll do next, and spoon-feeding you customized rewards. So if you've been wondering why it feels so incredibly hard to concentrate lately, or why the pull of distraction feels almost impossibly strong, well, this is why. We are fighting an unseen battle. Digital ecosystems are quite simply engineering habits better than we as individuals can resist them. Millions of us are walking onto a digital battlefield for our own minds every single time we unlock a screen, completely unaware that a war is even happening. Which brings us to our final section, part 5, Architects of the Future and the Quiet Power of Repetition. Let's take a deep breath and step back from all that noise for a second. Because despite how overwhelming the modern world is, the fundamental rules of how human beings actually transform, they haven't changed. We all have this cinematic fantasy that life gets transformed by dramatic, sweeping moments of epiphany. A sudden realization, one super difficult conversation, or a crazy intense burst of motivation. But honestly, that's an illusion. A single workout doesn't change anything. Writing one page doesn't change anything. It is never the intensity of the action that alters your life. It's the quiet, unbreakable consistency. As the saying goes, small actions repeated long enough eventually become invisible architects of destiny. When you first start forming a new habit, it feels so insignificant. It feels almost too small to even matter. But when you look back, years later, you realize that those tiny, everyday repetitions literally constructed your entire career, your deepest relationships, your total reality. Just look at how this progression actually plays out. This is where the abstract psychology becomes incredibly personal. Today, your actions are repeated. Tomorrow, those behaviors just become your normal everyday routine. Next month, those patterns solidify into your identity. And next year, that identity becomes your absolute destiny. Think about what that means. The future version of you already exists,
right now, in tiny fragmented pieces, living inside your current daily routines. We spend so much of our lives anxiously worrying about the future, just waiting for it to finally arrive. But the future doesn't arrive all at once. It quietly sneaks into the present through the tiny little actions you're automating today. Long before you ever notice your life actually changing, your habits have already started writing the narrative. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one lingering question to really ask yourself. If habits are how the future quietly enters the present, what chapter are you writing right now?